Good afternoon, students. I hope all of you are doing good and I hope your preparation is going fine. Welcome to the Analyst. This is 27th of December 2023 and we are here to discuss important articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express. Now, the handout of this session is there in the description box. You may utilize it to streamline your current affairs preparation. Now, coming to the table of contents. The first topic which we are going to cover today is related to your fiscal deficit. The second topic is related to India's TB burden, that is India's tuberculosis burden. The third topic is related to our graduates in our country facing unemployment. The fourth topic is related to Indian Meteorological Department, that is IMD. And last but not the least is related to INS Imphal. So coming to the first topic, that is fiscal deficit. Now, India's fiscal deficit may breach the 5.9% of the GDP's target for this year. That is why this fiscal deficit is in news. And for a GS paper 3, it becomes very, very important. Now, primarily, we have to understand first that what is this fiscal deficit? But before understanding this fiscal deficit, we need to understand what is the role of a government. So, government's primary role is to ensure public welfare. And for the government to ensure public welfare, of course, government needs to spend on the public. But from where will the government earn, or from where will the government generate its revenue? So primarily, the government generates its revenue from the tax-paying public and from the taxpayers. Now, let's say government is getting some receipts. So government is getting receipts from the tax-paying public, and from that receipt, government is doing some expenditure. So these are the two primary responsibilities of the government: to take receipts from the tax-paying public and to spend that money judiciously for nation's welfare and for the public's welfare. Now, if the government is spending some money, of course, based on the resources which the government is having, government would be planning how much to spend. But let's say if the government is spending more, that is expenditure of government is more than the receipts which the government is getting. That means the money which the government is getting, that is less, but the money which the government is spending, that is more. That is a condition of deficit. That means you are having now lesser money. Why? Because let's say if the government receives 100 rupees, but if the government is spending 120 rupees, so that 20 rupees extra which the government is spending, that extra spending is what you call as deficit. Now the question is that from where will the government get this 20 rupees? Of course, then to fulfill that deficit, government needs to borrow certain money. So the second question, that what does this fiscal deficit indicate? Fiscal deficit indicates the level of borrowing of the government. That means how much the government would be borrowing in order to cover the deficit which it is having. Now, why the term fiscal deficit? See, whenever you hear the term fiscal, it means we are talking about the financial resources of the government. Whenever you hear the term monetary, we are talking about the financial resources of the central bank of the country. That means of RBI. So fiscal deficit, that means a deficit of the government's financial resources. That is, government is spending more than what the government is receiving as receipts. I hope this fiscal deficit is very, very clear to all of you. Now, what does it indicate? We already covered that it indicates the level of borrowing which the government has to make. So in a way, it is an indicator of your government debt. So it is an indicator of the debt of the government. Now there are both pros and cons of this fiscal deficit. That means there are benefits and also there are disbenefits of this fiscal deficit. We need to understand first what are the positive aspects of it. After that, we'll be seeing the trend line of it as well. So what are the positive aspects? If the government is spending more, right? If the government is spending more, now you realize that the government is spending for what? For public welfare. So if the government is spending more, it's but natural that public welfare will also be ensured more. And if that is the case, of course, it is positive for the country only. So for positive aspect of the fiscal deficit is that higher government spending would mean higher levels of economic activity in the country. And if higher levels of economic activity is there, that means prosperity in the overall country will also increase. And if the government is spending, that means public investment in the country will also increase. Because government primarily spends on what? Government spends on infrastructure development. And if the government is spending on infrastructure development, a lot of people would be getting jobs also. So a lot of employment will be created, jobs will be created, income of people will be generated, higher incomes would be there. And if higher incomes would be there, people would be spending more and more. And if people keep on spending more and more, expenditure of one becomes the income of another. So if that is the case, a chain reaction will be created. That means 1 rupee spent by the government in the nation, in the country, will give benefits to the tune of 10 rupees, to the tune of 15 rupees. And that is nothing but your multiplier effect. And this multiplier effect was the primary reason that the Bharat package launched by the government in the year 2020 during the period of COVID-19, 2020, 2021, this Atmanirbhar Bharat package came into being, right? So because of this multiplier effect only, government thought of spending more and more on infrastructure development during the COVID times. Because the government will spend, let's say, 100 crore rupees. It will give benefit to the nation to the tune of 1000 crore rupees. Because that 100 crore would become income of some. If it becomes income of some, people would be spending money. And if the expenditure done by some other people would become the income of some other families, and they will get employment opportunities as well. Their income will also rise, their spending will also rise, their consumption will also rise, right? So overall, a chain reaction, a snowball effect, right, will be created in the economy. And the benefits of the economic activity will trickle down to the lower strata of the society as well. That is why there is a very positive aspect to fiscal deficit as well. That fiscal deficit is not always wrong, because the main motive of the government is not to do business, is not to remain profitable, but to ensure public welfare, but to ensure welfare of the entire nation. So that is the positive outlook towards it. Now we have to understand what has been the roadmap of fiscal deficit as a percentage of GDP in our country over the last few years. So let's start from the year 2017-18. So in the year 2017-18, in actuality, 3.5% was the fiscal deficit. So fiscal deficit was 3.5% of the GDP. In the next year, it became 3.4% of the GDP. In the year 2019-20, it increased to 4.6% of the GDP. That means government spending increased. In 2020-2021, during the period of COVID time, 9.2% was the fiscal deficit. So fiscal deficit as a percentage of GDP was 9.2%, which is extremely, extremely high, right? And of course, in 2021, 2022, we controlled it a bit and it came to 6.7%. And as we saw in the newspaper as well, currently, we will breach the target of 5.9%. So our fiscal deficit is going to be more than that for the year 2023-2024. We'll see that also in the next slide. Now coming to the negative approach or the negative aspects of fiscal deficit. Now we saw the positives, but there are negatives to it as well. That is, pros and cons both are existing. So what are the negatives? First very big negative is that higher the fiscal deficit, higher will be the borrowing requirement of the government. And if that is high, the debt burden, that is the burden of debt, the burden of borrowing on the government will also be higher. And having higher debt, is it good or bad? Primarily, it is not a very good thing. So it is a bad thing, having very huge debt, because debt is a burden on the government. And if government is burdened, ultimately who is burdened? The tax-paying public of the country, or the people or the population of that country, because government is reflective of the will of the public, right? Inflationary pressure. Now that is the second negative effect. Now how this is negative effect? Let's say government is spending very much into the economy. If the government is spending more and more, what is bound to happen? The money supply in the economy is bound to increase. And if money supply is bound to increase, that means people are having more money at their disposal. People would be willing to pay more and more or higher and higher for the same commodities. And if people are willing to pay higher and higher, the producers would be increasing the price of their commodities. So ultimately, higher money or more money at the disposal of the public will lead to inflationary pressures. That means inflation would occur in the economy, prices will shoot up. So prices will be higher in the economy. So that is also one of the negative aspect, because prices will be higher and it will be deeply impacting whom? It will be deeply impacting the poor and the marginalized section of the society. That is why it is bad. Now coming to the crowding out effect. The crowding out effect means that because government is investing so much into the country, in so much into the infrastructure, so in a way it will crowd out the private sector investments into the economy. Because any which way, whole of the scenario or whole of the picture would be controlled and covered by the government only. Government would have spent so much into the infrastructure, so much investment into the country, that private sector investment will be crowded out and they will be going outside of our country. That is also one of the negative aspects which is pointed out by several of the experts. And since India is facing with this twin deficit problem, that is, India is having high current account deficit as well. Current account deficit means what? That we are exporting less but importing more. So our imports are more than our exports. So India is having current account deficit problem as well, and India is also having fiscal deficit problem. So this twin deficit problem for a country is not a very good thing, right? It's not a very happy place for a country to be in. That is why it is a negative aspect of this fiscal deficit also. And this fiscal deficit needs actually to be controlled. Now, what are the various steps which have been taken by the government towards fiscal consolidation, towards fiscal management, towards reducing this fiscal deficit? What are the various steps? First step is subsidies rationalization. Now, I told you that government is spending more than what is required. So government is spending more than what the government is earning. And government is spending on what? For public welfare. But in actuality, where the government is spending more money? Government is spending more money in giving people subsidies. Whether it be agriculture subsidies, whether it be food related subsidy, whether it be fertilizer related subsidy, government is providing subsidies to its public, to its population. Now, subsidy rationalization. That means now the government has started rationalizing the subsidies, giving subsidy to only those who require it the most. Giving subsidy not to every section of the population, because every section of the population is not requiring the subsidies. If subsidy on LPG cylinder needs to be given, it needs to be given to the lower income group, not to every individual in the country who is using LPG, right? So we need to rationalize the subsidy. If we rationalize the subsidy, the expenditure of the government will be lowered down. And if the expenditure of the government will be lowered down, fiscal deficit will be controlled and fiscal deficit will also come down. Then debt management. So government needs to manage its debt as also, because if the government knows that okay, we can borrow $200 billion or $200 million from this particular bank or this particular country, they would spend more money, right? They would spend more money because they know they would be able to borrow the money. So they need to manage the debt also. Government needs to manage its debt also. Debt of a country should not be very, very high. Debt to GDP ratio of a country also needs to be maintained. If debt management takes place, ultimately fiscal deficit will also lower down, because government would not be going for the debt option and they will not be spending more and more, right? So fiscal deficit again will be controlled. Fiscal prudence. Now fiscal prudence is also in sync with subsidy rationalization. Fiscal prudence means that government is very prudent in its actions. Government is carefully considering each and every expenditure of them, right? So each and every expenditure made by the government should be very carefully considered. Each and every rupee spent by the government should be very carefully considered. It should not be spending money on lavish gatherings, right? On lavish expenditures. It should only spend money for the welfare of the public, welfare of the population. So fiscal prudence also needs to be there. And also, to ensure all of these things, debt management, fiscal prudence, fiscal consolidation, government came up with a very historic act, which you right now call as FRBM Act, that is Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act of 2003. Now, under this act only, the targets are set for fiscal deficit. That this is the particular target. Of course, it keeps on changing, but this is the particular level of target which the government wants to achieve in consideration of its fiscal deficit as a percentage of GDP. So this FRBM Act is also a step ahead and step towards fiscal consolidation taken by the government. And last but not the least, increasing the tax base. So just not reducing the expenditure, but also increasing the receipts and the revenue of the government also. So government is also taking various steps to increase its revenue resources. And how so? Through increasing the tax base. Now the GST reform, which is a very historic simplification of indirect taxes in our country, or whether we talks about the direct tax code, or whether be it launching a faceless assessment scheme by the government. All of these schemes or all of these initiatives are taken by the government to ensure the tax base in our country increases. And if tax base in our country increases, we all get to know that fiscal deficit will be controlled. Why? Because our revenue streams, our receipts will be increasing. So our expenditure will not pinch us anymore, because we'll be not spending more than what we are having, because what we are having is going to increase because of this increase in tax base. I hope this is clear to all of you, and the steps taken by the government for fiscal consolidation is very, very clear to all of you. Now, what has been the trend of deficit in the past few years? So, in the year 2021-2022, fiscal deficit was 6.7% of the GDP. The next year, 2022-2023, 6.4% of the GDP. And the current year, what is the target? 2023-2024, the target is 5.9%. But what is in news? What is in news is that government is set to breach that target, 5.9%. So government would not be able to keep the fiscal deficit under this 5.9%. It is going to go beyond this 5.9% of the GDP. That is why it was in news, and we understood all things which are related to fiscal deficit. I hope this fiscal deficit as a topic is very, very clear to all of you. Now, coming to the second topic, a very important topic. It's related to India's TB burden, right? So India's tuberculosis burden. So recent studies have suggested that shorter duration treatment approaches are showing effectiveness against TB. Now, for a general studies paper 2, where healthcare has been specifically mentioned, this TB becomes very important for us. Now, what is TB? We need to understand. The first question which should come in our mind is, what is this TB? So TB, first of all, it's an infectious disease, and it's caused by a bacteria which you call as Mycobacterium tuberculosis. So MTB is the name of the bacteria, and it affects primarily your lungs. So TB is an infectious disease caused by a bacteria, that is your MTB, and primarily it's affecting which organ? That is your lungs. And if that TB bacteria, MTB bacteria, it's affecting your lungs, you call it as pulmonary tuberculosis. But if it's affecting other parts of our body, we call it as extrapulmonary tuberculosis. So if a question comes that TB only affects lungs, will that be right? No, that won't be right, because there is pulmonary tuberculosis, there is extrapulmonary tuberculosis as well. Now, according to WHO, World Health Organization Global TB Report of 2023, India is having the highest burden of TB cases in the world as of year 2022. And this is 27% of the global burden. So if a question comes in your mains examination, at least you would be able to answer that according to WHO, this global TB report of 2023, India is having the highest burden of TB in the entire world. And India constitutes 27% of the global cases of TB in the entire world. And this 27%, it's close to 2.8 million cases. That means 28.2 lakh TB cases in India were reported in the year 2022, right? And the case fatality ratio is 12%, right? So this is related to India's TB burden, that what is the burden of tuberculosis in our country. And coming to the malnutrition and tuberculosis junction, WHO says that 40% of the TB patients, they are also suffering from malnutrition. So now we'll be understanding the concept of malnutrition and tuberculosis as well, after understanding what is India's TB burden. But before understanding that, we need to know what are the risk factors of TB. Because after that, the malnutrition and TB aspect we'll be able to relate more. So first, very important risk factor for a person to get that bacteria, right, TB bacteria, is undernourishment. If the person is not getting proper nutrients, if the person is not properly nourished, the person is more prone for this TB, that is tuberculosis. Also, if a person is suffering from HIV/AIDS, or if a person is an alcoholic, drinking alcohol regularly, if a person is smoking regularly, so is a chain smoker, or if the person is suffering from diabetes. So if a person is having undernourishment, HIV, alcohol, smoking, and suffering from diabetes, in all these cases, the risk factor for a person to contact TB becomes higher, right? Now coming specifically to malnutrition, that how malnutrition and TB are related. So if you see this particular image, it will show you that malnutrition, of course, it comes from inadequate dietary intake. So if the dietary intake is inadequate, what will happen? Of course, there will be weight loss, there will be growth faltering, And because of this growth faltering, this weight loss, immunity of a person will be lower. Now, if all these things are there, of course, the incidence of disease, the severity of disease and duration of disease in a person will be higher. Because if a person is not taking dietary intake properly, and if all these conditions are taking place, that is, weight loss is there, then growth faltering is there, lower immunity is there. If all these things are there, of course, if a person is contacting any disease, its incidence will be higher, its frequency will be higher, its duration will also be higher, right? And if that is the case, then because of that disease itself, person will be suffering from appetite loss, person will be suffering from nutrient loss, person would be suffering from nutrient malabsorption and impaired metabolism as well. And now if all these things of a person is suffering from, another thing is that person will not be able to intake a proper diet. So all of this is a cycle that if a person is suffering from malnutrition, the chances of that person contacting TB will be higher. And the chances of person dying from TB will also be higher. Why? Because the person's immune system will be very, very weak. So malnutrition, of course, it weakens the immune system of a person. And also it leads to wasting, decreased muscle mass that we all know, lung function gets impaired, and it is easy for the bacteria to infect your body. So it is easy for bacterial infection as well. And of course, we all know that TB leads to weight loss, it leads to appetite loss, metabolic changes are there, and thus low nutrient absorption is there. So malnutrition is there. Malnutrition will make you catch TB very quickly. And if TB is there, you will any which way not able to absorb the nutrients, right? So this is a very vicious cycle, and ultimately we see the death of a person. So this means what? That a person needs to focus on all of these risk factors in order to ensure that a person becomes a TB resilient, right? And also anorexia, weight loss, and a weak immune system are one of the parts of your tuberculosis as well. I hope this India's TB burden and the malnutrition and TB aspect of it is very, very clear to all of you. Now, the third topic, which is a very important topic again, is, are graduates in our country facing unemployment? Now, the unemployment rate amongst highly educated individuals in India is consistently high. And all of us know also that unemployment rate in our country, primarily among the highly educated individuals, it is increasing a lot. Now, this is a very important issue which we need to discuss as well for our examinations, and for our overall understanding and maturity as well, we need to understand this topic. So, for GS Paper 3 Indian Economy section, this unemployment topic becomes important. But first of all, if we have to discuss about unemployment amongst graduates, we need to understand what is the concept of unemployment. So usually we have a term which you call as labor force, right? That means people who are a part of labor force. But what is this labor force? We'll discuss. But let's say in a country there is a population, right? Now in the population, there would be people who would be working and there would be people who would not be working, right? Now those who are working, of course, they can easily be categorized as people who are employed. But those who are not working. Now, those who are not working, amongst them, there is two categories. One category is a person who is not working but willing to work and also looking for work also. But there is a category of person who is not working and also not willing to work. Now, this category of person who is not willing to work is not a part of the labor force of our country. Because that person is not even willing to work and is not looking for work also. But the people who are unemployed but willing to work and those who are employed, these two categories we combine and form the labor force. And whenever we talk about unemployed people, so unemployed people are those who are looking for work, seeking work, willing to work, but not getting the requisite work. They are the people which you call as unemployed. And unemployment rate means the unemployed population, right, divided by the labor force. That is your unemployment rate. And unemployed population, only this category, that is those who are willing to work. Not this category, that means those who are not even willing to work. They are just out of the labor force. I hope this unemployment rate and how employed and unemployment is calculated, it is very clear to all of you. Now let us see the actual data. Now, you all must have heard about the labor force participation rate and unemployment rates in our country. So, you see, from 2016 to 2021, right? So, in these 5 years, the labor force participation and employment rate, it has hovered around the range of 35 to 40%, right? So 35 to 40% ideally, this labor force participation rate and unemployment rate has been there. So labor force participation rate is higher and unemployment and employment rate is lower than the labor force participation rate. I hope this is very clear to all of you. But what is very important for us to understand is the unemployment rate in our country. And of course, if this data you see from 2016 to 2021, some year it has been 8.7%, sometimes it has been 5.5%, 2019 it was 6.9%, 2020 it was 11.6%, 2021 it was 7.3%. Now, if I talk about the last 1 year, that is 2023 and 2022, in the last 12 months, if I talk about a monthly basis based on periodic labor force survey data, unemployment rate in our country has hovered around the range of 7 to 8%, right? So unemployment rate in our country is close to how much? 7 to 8%. But what is our concern? Our concern is the unemployment faced by the graduates in our country. That means unemployment faced by those who are highly skilled, also those who are highly educated also, right? Not per se highly skilled, but let's say highly educated, those who are graduates, those who have completed their graduation. Amongst them, the unemployment rate is even higher. And there are several reports as well that close to 90% or 80% of the engineers in our country are unemployable because they lack industry level skills, right? So even though they are engineers, but still they are unemployable by the industry standards, right? So all of these data also suggest that graduates in our country, they are facing unemployment, because it is very easy to say that a person is not having education, so person can suffer from unemployment. But here we are seeing a case that people are having education also, people are educated also, gone in a college, went to a college, done the regular traditional education which is there, and still they are not getting jobs, right? So this is a cause of concern. And what are these causes of unemployment? Primarily because of these graduates. In relation to these graduates, what are the causes? Why are they not getting employed? So there are few reasons which we have listed down. First reason is your economic slowdown. Now, because of the global economic slowdown also, because of the global economic slowdown and India's economic slowdown as well, there is a condition which you call as cyclical unemployment, right? So based on business cycles, whenever there is a boom, there is a bust, right? So whenever the business cycle is growing higher, whenever the business cycle is growing lower, whenever the business cycle is going up, more and more people would be employed. But whenever the business cycle goes down, whenever the economic activities slow down, there will be mass layoffs. You must be hearing news that some particular company laid off 12,000 employees, Google laying off lot of employees, Meta laying off lot of employees, Tesla laying off lot of employees, right? So these news we keep on hearing, and now we keep on hearing these news in relation to India also, right? That these many mass layoffs are happening in a variety of companies. Why this is the case? Because of the economic slowdown and also population explosion. Now, this is a case which is unique to India. Now, since population of our country is 1.4 billion, right? And the resources in our country are limited, resources are scarce. So there is a limited resources and unlimited wants. Because of this, there is scarcity. Now, there is scarcity of jobs in our country also. Because there are limited jobs, but so many people who are wanting to do those jobs. So population explosion is one of the reason. And since our economy primarily currently also is very much agrarian, right? And agriculture sector is not able to absorb a lot of jobs, right? Of course, if it is able to absorb a lot of jobs, agriculture economy, it creates a problem which you call as disguised unemployment, right? So even if they employ the graduates, that employment will be disguised one, right? So disguised unemployment will take place because of this agrarian economy. Because agriculture sector, the number of people who are involved currently in agriculture sector, that number even in itself is very, very high, right? So agriculture can't absorb a lot of individuals currently. Now, variety of social factors as well, caste-based factors, right? Especially in the rural areas I'm talking about. In rural areas and backward areas of a country currently, these social factors also play a very crucial role in people not getting employment. But the biggest factor which I consider is the skill mismatch. That means mismatch between what is the skill required by the industry and what is the skill which you are having as an employee, right? So there is a very big skill mismatch. That is, industry related skills are not there with the people. Especially we talk about engineers, but it is applicable throughout the areas. So amongst arts students as well, amongst commerce students as well, amongst sciences students as well, there is no requisite skill set which they get from the colleges, right? And if they're not getting skill sets in the colleges, in real life, in the real jobs, what is required are the skills only, right? So there is skill mismatch. That is the biggest reason why the graduates in our countries are facing unemployment. Lack of universal education and training. Of course, the lower level, the secondary level education is of course there in our country. Primary education in our country is universal, is free. But the higher education in our country, because in one of the previous analysts we saw that the people who are going for the higher level of studies, higher education, the people are very, very less, right? So there is huge dropout rate as well. So lack of universal higher education and training is also a case of concern. Lack of entrepreneurship opportunities. Now, as a prime minister also says that you should not seek job always. You should also be a job provider. So rather than being a job seeker, be a job provider. Whether be it a small business, whether be it in MSMEs, or whether be it any large business as well. So the startup culture in our country, of course, that is being promoted. But since our population is very high, or since our population is very huge, entrepreneurship opportunities in our country is not in sync with our population, right? So seeing the top 100 unicorns in our country, you can't say, because our population is very huge. So seeing the top 100 unicorns in our country, you can't say, okay, startup culture is very much booming. Of course it is booming, but only in the urban areas. In rural areas, 70-80% of our population, right, still is not getting the benefit of that startup culture or entrepreneurship opportunities. Regional disparities, right? So let's say we talk about our northeast region, or we talk about your Jammu and Kashmir region, or various other regions in our country, right? Let's say tier 2, tier 3 cities, right? They are also not enjoying a lot of benefits of this entrepreneurship culture or education or skill based education, right? So unemployment in these areas is very, very high, right? And then people migrate from these areas to the urban areas, metropolitan areas, for example, in New Delhi, or let's say your Bangalore, Hyderabad. So people migrate. And if the people are not able to get job there also, then people go to another country. People go to other countries, let's say UK or US or Canada, Australia, Europe, right? So people go into these countries, and the people who are very much talented, who are educated, because they are not able to get jobs in our country, they go to other countries, they work, and they become successful, right? So in a way, brain drain is also a very big issue, which is a resultant of this unemployment, right? It's a resultant of it. Then technological change, again, skill mismatch and technological change. So you see right now, Industry 4.0, right? This is currently the trend. So your artificial intelligence, robotics, automotive industry, right? These are the trending industries right now. So if you're not matching your skills up to these industries, if you're not knowing how to use artificial intelligence, of course, there will be a skill mismatch and you will not be employed, right? So technological change is also one of the reason, and also gender aspect also we should not forget. So gender inequality. Now, of course, graduates are facing unemployment, but who, amongst them, females, right? Amongst them, females are the one, because of gender inequality, patriarchal mindset of our society, they are also not getting employment opportunities. And unemployment level amongst women is even higher, right? So I hope the causes of unemployment is again very much clear to all of you. Now, what are the measures taken by the government to ensure that employment opportunities are created? Of course, PM Mudra Yojana is there. So providing loans for entrepreneurship opportunities, Shishu Kishore Tarun, right? These are the three loan instruments under this Mudra Yojana. Then Rozgar Protsahan Yojana, right? Employment opportunities again, motivating people to take up employment opportunities. Skill India Mission providing people with the skill sets necessary. PM Swanidhi, that is street vendors, Atmanirbhar Nidhi launched during the COVID-19 time. Then your MG Narega, right? So Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Generation Act, of course, to provide 100 days employment to the rural poor and to the rural poor households. Then your Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana, National Rural Livelihood Mission, National Urban Livelihood Mission. Of course, these initiatives have been launched by the government to ensure that employment opportunities are created, right? And government is also focusing on infrastructure activities, multiplier effect, Bharatmala, Sagarmala, Yojana, all of these things government is doing. But it is our responsibility to ensure that skill development, and not just skill development, I will use an even broader term, that is your human resource development. So it is our duty as individuals as well, as society as well, as educational institutions as well, that we focus on human resource development. Human resource development, and also a term which you call as human capital formation. So it's our duty to focus on these things again in order to ensure that the graduates who are facing unemployment in our country, they get employed, and they get employed adequately, right? Where the skill is matching the job. So they are not underemployed, but they are optimally employed. I hope this is very clear to all of you. Now coming to the fourth topic, that is Indian Meteorological Department. So IMD on Tuesday got a new logo ahead of its commencement of 150th year of IMD. Now for our GS Paper 3 disaster management, for our GS Paper 1 geophysical phenomena, this IMD becomes very, very important. Now IMD of course was established in the year 1875, and it provides a national meteorological services to our country. That is why it is the principal government agency for meteorology and allied subjects in our country. And who is the head of this IMD? The Director General of Meteorology. And this IMD is having 6 regional meteorological centers. And who heads these regional centers? Your Deputy Director General. And where are the headquarters of these 6 regional meteorological centers? One is in Mumbai, one is in Chennai, then New Delhi, Calcutta, Nagpur, and Guwahati. And the headquarter of IMD per se is your New Delhi. And it is coming under which ministry? It comes under your Ministry of Earth Sciences. I hope IMD related information, the factual part, is very clear to all of you. Now, what is this mandate of IMD? Now, mandate of IMD is to do meteorological observations. Now, the current forecast and also the future forecast informations, to provide weather sensitive activity related information, of course, which will help your agriculture industry, shipping industry, aviation industry, offshore oil exploration, and all the other kind of activities as well. So it is providing meteorological data related to weather. So weather sensitive activities data it is providing, right? And current and future forecast information the IMD is providing. Now it is also providing warning as well. Warning of what? Warning of severe weather phenomena. For example, a cyclone is coming, a tsunami is erupting, right? So warning is also provided by this IMD, Indian Meteorological Department. And also meteorological statistics, which will help in which sectors? Helpful for which sectors? Your agriculture sector, water resource management, industries, oil exploration, and a lot of other avenues and sectors as well. And last but not the least, the function of IMD is to conduct and promote research in meteorology and allied subjects as well. So that is the overall role of IMD. And we are going to commence the 150th year of setting up of this IMD. And that is why a new logo has been launched of IMD. Now coming to last topic, that is INS Imphal. Now INS Imphal has been commissioned into Indian Navy on Tuesday. Now this is again a very historic thing and it's very important. That is why for our exam, the current event of national importance for your preliminary examination, this topic becomes important. Also for our general studies paper 3, our security of the country, internal security and the security of the nation, in that respect this INS Imphal becomes important. Now what is this INS Imphal? First of all, it is a warship and it is a third warship of Project 15B. Right? And what is this Project 15B? This Project 15B is forming your Vishakhapatnam class stealth guided missile destroyers. Right? So Vishakhapatnam class stealth guided missile destroyers are created under this Project 15B. And INS Imphal is the third warship under this Project 15B. And it is the largest and the most advanced destroyer. So it's a warship. And what kind of warship? It is a destroyer warship. What is a destroyer warship? We'll understand on another slide. But this is a destroyer warship. And it's the largest and the most advanced destroyer warship named after a city from the northeast region. That is Imphal. Now, what is this Vishakhapatnam class? Vishakhapatnam class, a stealth guided missile destroyer, this INS Imphal is. But what is this Vishakhapatnam class? Now, Vishakhapatnam class is the most advanced ship classes in our country. of Indian Navy, which is having capability of independent offensive operations. So independent offensive operations, this Vishakhapatnam class can carry on. And what are the arsenal under this Vishakhapatnam class? So what are the arms, ammunitions, arsenals under this? First is BrahMos surface-to-surface cruise missile. That is present under Vishakhapatnam class. BrahMos surface-to-surface cruise missile. Then there is vertically launched Barak 8, which is your surface-to-air missiles, right? Then 127 mm main gun is there. Then AK-630, 30 mm guns for close point engagement. For close point engagement, AK-630, 30 mm guns are there. Then indigenously developed 533 mm torpedo launchers are there, right? So what are they? BrahMos surface-to-surface cruise missile, Barak 8, which is your surface-to-air missile system. Then 127 mm main gun is there. AK-630, 30 mm gun for close point engagement is there. Then your torpedo launchers, which is your 533 mm. Then your RBU 6000. What is RBU 6000? It is an anti-submarine rocket launcher. So anti-submarine rocket launchers are also there. This is the arsenal of Vishakhapatnam class. Now you would know how strong this Vishakhapatnam class is, right? And this INS Imphal is the third warship under this Vishakhapatnam class under the project name of 15B. Now we have to understand what is a destroyer. So first of all, you see this image. This is INS Imphal and it is a destroyer warship. Now destroyer is a warship which protects the fleets and carrier battle groups from short range attackers. So from short range attackers, this INS Imphal will protect the fleets and carrier battle groups from the short range attackers. And of course, they operate independently. Why do they operate independently? Because they are well equipped for network centric warfare. That is network centric warfare, which involves your information technology and computer and networking tools. That is why it operates independently also, and it is a destroyer warship. I hope this INS Imphal is very, very clear to all of you. So all the very best to all of you, and thank you for watching the lecture. Good luck.